I want to welcome you to this public conversation and discussion co-hosted by Mona Law as well as the Institute of Caribbean Studies. Welcome especially to those of you who are joining us from other parts of the university, from beyond the university, to students and faculty around the university campus. We're pleased to be able to host the discussion today with our feature address by Professor Donna Hope and commence by Chuck Cameron, and hopefully we'll be joined by Nadeen Spence as well. I'm going to hand over the duty of welcome to the Associate Dean for Outreach, Dr. Ramona Bueller.
Thank you, Tracy. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the UE community, members of the legal profession, students, visitors from Canada and Finland, colleagues, friends, a pleasant evening and happy International Women's Day as well. So, as Tracy mentioned, my name is Ramona Bueller and I teach here in the Faculty of Law. And on behalf of Acting Dean, Dr. Shazida Ali of the Faculty of Law, welcome to Mona Law. I would like to make a special mention of Dr. Stanley Naya, the Director of Institute of Caribbean Studies, and our distinguished panelists, Professor Donna Hope, Mr. Chuck Cameron. Hopefully Nadeen Spence will soon come here. It's a great pleasure to have you here at this public forum that Mona Law and the Institute of Caribbean Studies organized this afternoon with the intention to offer a platform for discussing issues that have been sparked by circulation in the media of photos of Mona Law female students in dancehall attire actually for the law students annual contest. Mr. and Miss Law themed this year Jamaica Rewind from a Taller Time to celebrate reggae and dancehall during the Reggae Month. As mentioned, we have a distinguished panel with Professor Donna Hope, Mr. Chuck Cameron, and Ms. Nadeen Spence, chaired by Tracy Robinson, Deputy Dean for Research and Graduate Studies. And this will start what I'm sure a very engaging discussion. So welcome again, and before we start the program for tonight, I would like to invite Dr. Stanley Naya to bring remarks from the Institute of Caribbean Studies.
Thank you very much, Ramona. Thank you very much, Tracy. Good afternoon. It is absolutely a pleasure to be here in the Faculty of Law. I seem to be present a bit often this year. We just co-hosted another event with the Faculty of Law, the Beyond Homophobia Conference. And here we are again now in the month of March, co-hosting with the Mona Law another event. It is always a pleasure to be collaborating with other faculties, institutions on the Mona campus and external to the UWI, in particular on matters related to Jamaican music, Jamaican popular culture. So in this event where there has been a debate germane to the work that we do in the Institute of Caribbean Studies related to Jamaican music, related to dancehall culture in particular, we are absolutely pleased to be able to collaborate. I trust that this afternoon's talk, lecture, panel will bring important insights, some of which we have not yet heard in the context of the wider circulation of ideas around this issue, but that we will be more edified, and I'm surprised to see that there aren't more students from the Faculty of Law here, because I think this event is very much being staged for them. In fact, one of the comments we received was, why is it that there weren't any student, female and male panelists on the, in this event? But be that as it may, the fact is that we are here to enjoy and be educated in ways that we may not have before. Like I said previously, it is a pleasure for the Institute of Caribbean Studies and Reggae Studies Unit to collaborate on this event. It comes in a year when we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Reggae Studies Unit and just concluded a successful staging of the Global Reggae Conference. So these ideas, especially leaving Reggae Month on a high, we want to be able to absolutely collaborate and contribute to important discussions like these. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stanley Nair. It's my pleasure to, again, welcome Professor Hope and to introduce her. Many of you have heard both from Dr. Stanley Nair and Professor Hope in the conversations over the last 2 weeks. Professor Hope is the Professor of Culture, Gender and Society at the Institute of Caribbean Studies. She's also the Deputy Dean for Graduate Studies and Research in the Faculty of Humanities and Education here at the UWI Mona. Her research has resulted in over 40 publications, including 5 books. They include her recently published Reggae Stories, Jamaica Musical Legends and Cultural Legacies, Reggae from Yard, Traditional and Emerging Themes in Jamaica Popular Music, International Reggae, Current and Future Trends in Jamaica Popular Music, Main Vibes, Masculinities in the Jamaican Dancehall, Inner the Dancehall, Popular Culture, and the Politics of Identity in Jamaica. She's been engaged in many academic and popular discussions, both locally and wider afield, on popular culture in the Caribbean, gender politics and creative industries in the print and electronic media. Her first self-published motivational book, Chicken Back Gravy and Such Delights, Life Lessons from My Journey, will be coming out in 2019, so we should be looking closely for that. She's also completing a manuscript on the global spread of Jamaica popular culture through dancehall dance industry under the title Dancehall Scattered Children. Her key areas of research include popular culture and music, dancehall culture, youth development, black masculinities, cultural creative industries, gender, identity, and power. Welcome, Professor Hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson, Tracy Robinson, sorry. And I invited my students to come to this lecture this evening as a part of some of the activities we're having. I'm still looking around the room to see some of them. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everyone who is here, individuals who are not campus representatives, visitors from abroad. I want to welcome Una from Finland, who is here doing research on dancehall culture as well. We have a lot of interest on dancehall culture outside of Jamaica, and a lot of academic research going on about dancehall culture in Europe, for example. And so I want to welcome everyone here, welcome my friend Kanil Cole, Facebook friends and such delights, and I like to use that terminology, but also to just, in a real sense, problematize in a slight moment the understanding of why we are here this evening. Because of course, we are here this evening because we have been brought together inside of a debate that has taken a lot of energy during Reggae Month, particularly the last week of Reggae Month. The debate burst on the 22nd of February, and we really plummeted us into a great deal of cyberspace moments, but also ruminations in the newspapers and elsewhere around a very important and critical aspect of who we are as a people in Jamaica, and also how we view ourselves through various lenses, popular culture lenses, gendered lenses, lenses of identity, and of course the relationship between a legal field and a very important popular culture field, and how youth and youth culture respond to all of this. So I have this letter up, which all of us have seen, contextualizing the debate for us. This letter, along with 6 photographs of 6 young women from this faculty, was sent around on the 22nd of February and sparked a debate that was energized by this article in particular. And so we have to understand how the debate began. and what are some of the tenets of that debate. And the headlines of that article are very clear. Below the bar, you will lost society faces heat over vulgar photos, setting the tone for how the debate would then be energized over a weekend. This is a Saturday newspaper. Usually Saturdays are very low periods in journalism. And this headline and the resulting discussion expanded and exploded in very significant ways. And one of the things that many people kept asking is why this heat? Why this enormous heat around something that on the face of it seemed very simple, but really, based on the depth and the intensity of the debate, was recognized as being far more than just some photographs of young women and young men dressing up, play acting, we are told, as members of the dancehall fraternity. So my main works on dancehall, In the Dancehall, my first book, talks about dancehall as a cultural site of identity and power debates, especially social power debates, and it hinted as well at the kind of gender discussions that are very important in dancehall culture. And then my next work, Man Vibes, went more in depth and looked at hegemonic masculinity as it was exemplified in dancehall culture through several exemplars that are very popular in dancehall. And I use the terminologies that came from dancehall at that time to sort of ruminate and try to explore what was happening in dancehall culture through the lenses of hegemonic masculinity. And ended the last chapter, Fashion Over Style. This book came out in 2010, talking a lot about what I saw as an important move in dancehall culture at that time, at the end of the first decade of the new millennium, where it seemed that there was a transformation in how men were fashioning themselves. So let's look a little bit at dancehall. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is that coming out of the discussions, and I wrote an article that I sent to the Observer that same Saturday in the heat of the discussion, and one of the questions that I kept asking was whether or not as people, or as law students, for example, we understood dancehall culture clearly to be able to predict and or understand the intensity of the debate that took place, especially in social media. And I spent a lot of time that Saturday and Sunday wading through the myriad of information, statements, supportive and non-supportive, that made the rounds of social media. Twitter in particular was very vibrant, so was Facebook and Instagram. So I want to talk a little bit about dancehall in terms of understanding and setting the kind of stage for what we understand dancehall to be. So dancehall culture took shape and form in the late 70s to the early 80s, and we are talking about dancehall culture as we understood it when it becomes shaped as a genre. We are still having debates as to whether or not dancehall is a genre. I had a discussion like that today on Facebook, where we are still told that dancehall is not a genre, it is reggae. And so dancehall has no status as a genre, it is reggae, and it's a different type of reggae music. Of course, my work takes a different tack and a different sort of stance, and a lot of us also take that understanding that dancehall in and of itself is both music but also a very broadly defined popular cultural space. Some of us see it as a subculture that comes out of certain spaces in Jamaica's musical history. For example, the sound system culture of the 50s and 60s, crediting also Sir Cox and Dodd and others for the early toast and talkover style. And what I'm trying to do here is to condense a very large discussion into the 35 or 40 minutes that I have been afforded on a Friday evening. And so I have up here some of dancehall's precursors on the early wave of artists, and they sound different from our contemporary dancehall artists of the 90s, of the 2000s, of the post-millennial era. But these are earlier precursors. King Stitt, the ugly one, Count Machuki, Big Man U-Roy, and many of us know that particular song, Wake the Town, because it is the title, it is this early subtitle of Norman Stalzov's treatise on dancehall, Wake the Town, and speaking about dancehall culture. So I'll play a little segment of it so we hear the sound of that particular era.
Now we the common of the
And one of the reasons why I usually play some of these songs, not just to sort of focus us around, and I'm not going to do that today, around some of the themes that come out in the music. For example, Lee Van Cleef, which plays homage to one of the big bad stars back in the days, in the 50s and so, Hollywood stars, big bad star of Western, gunned down in the town, that kind of thing, which suggests to us that we have been, in various forms of our music, paying homage to that level of aggression and gun violence that is very important. Herdman Shuffle, which talks about marijuana in a very explicit way, but also to let us understand the development in terms of what dancehall culture becomes as a form that not only gives us a line or two over a track, but gives us an entire poetic treatise, complete with a hook, that speaks about different aspects of life in Jamaica using different thematic formations. So we talk about dancehall and we have all these various definitions floating around, as we do with reggae. The original meaning of the term was a literal term. People went to a place called a hall, where they staged dances. So it's a location. When I came into dancehall early in the 80s, we went to something called a lawn. So you go at the lawn. People still use that terminology. And a lawn, yes, a lawn, L-A-W-N, is a location where you go up, an area that is usually fenced, maybe has some grass, and this is where the dances take place, like hardcore dance, you go to a lawn. And so that terminology is also associated with the location that the events that were associated with dancehall would take place. And then we have an understanding that dancehall comes after the heyday of reggae and is the kind of music culture that comes to prominence in Jamaica in the early 1980s. And some discussions suggest that at that time, the turn of the 80s, with the death of Bob Marley, there was a kind of reversal in the way that the music was now being delivered and transmitted. We understand it to be a form of music that has DJs toasting over the rhythm. And when I did my early research on dancehall culture, as an academic research, as a Master of Philosophy student, MPhil in the Department of Government, one of the things that I came up with was a definition that pulled many things together and spoke about dancehall not just as music, but also as a kind of space, a sociocultural space that did several things, created and disseminated symbols and ideologies that reflect and legitimize the lived realities of its adherents, particularly those from the inner cities of Jamaica. And I use the word inner cities of Jamaica because we were at that time beginning to see the outward spread of the Kingston metropolitan area and what would become over time, which we see now, the significant urbanization of Jamaica that is characterized with the rise of that garrison phenomenon outside of Kingston Center. So we are now, that has blossomed into full form, and when you listen to the dancehall tunes or listen to the news, you will hear discussions about other spaces outside of Kingston, Clarendon, St. Catherine, St. James, Westmoreland, and elsewhere, where that kind of significant urbanization, which is a part of the process of development, has also resulted in the ghettoization of spaces that were once considered country, rural, agrarian. We live with that as a part of development. Dancehall is also many things, a cultural stage where the creators and adherents, mainly from inner cities and working classes, narrate their self-conceptions and parody and perform self-images. And this involves many things. But it's also an entertainment scene, characterized by DJs, sound systems, stage shows, clubs, dancehall queens and divas. And one of the things that is very popular now, everybody's shoulders flinging, energetic dances. And so the dances have become very popular, particularly since the 7th of December, 2017, when the Prime Minister stood on the stage at the Youth Awards and having received an award, Cool Ravers, having received an award for culture, one of the youth awards, the Prime Minister then engaged in the flinging your shoulder, and suddenly the entire Jamaica discovered that there was something called the dancehall dance industry that had been in existence since the first decade of the new millennium, and which had blossomed since 2012 into something that has far-reaching branches, which I'm writing about, Joseph, in my next book. Hopefully we will have a relationship. I'm throwing words at one of my publishers. The UA Press is in the house. Big up yourself. Now, dancehall is also, again, and this is looking at dancehall historically, aligned with many different facets. So we have different facets, sound system culture, which is a very developed and now kind of being whittled away. But dancehall is also driven by new technologies, and we see very clearly where the evolution and the explosion in media forms here in Jamaica, particularly during the period when we were going through the liberalization of media. And I talk about this a lot in the first section of my Inna the Dancehall. Dancehall has benefited quite significantly from a liberalized media landscape, as well as access to digital sound, computers, and the internet. All other forms of music before dancehall did not benefit from this, and all other music cultures before dancehall did not benefit from this. And what this has meant is that this democratization of access has resulted in far greater reach, far wider span, and a great deal more opportunities for the men and women from Kingston's inner cities and other marginalized spaces to showcase and to project their narratives, their self-images, their dances, and their fashion and other aspects of self into the global and regional imagination in a very clear way, and to benefit from that. And I'm just going through some of these things here. More radio stations, and there are a few of us in this room, maybe 3, who will remember when we had 2 radio stations. Maybe 3 of us in this room will remember when we only had 3 radio stations. I remember it very clearly. My age is off every calendar. Many of us will remember when we only had 1 single television station, and only the people who were well-resourced had access, for example, to the digital footprint of the satellite footprints coming from North America, and they could afford satellite dishes. So there was 1 television station. It signed on at 6 a.m. and signed off at midnight, and the bars would come on the screen. That was a long time ago in Jamaica's history, wasn't it? Some of you in this room were not yet born. Dancehall comes of age in an era when many things are made more accessible. Dancehall also benefited from stage show culture, and I put up a lot of stage shows there. Many of them no longer exist. And by my assessment, we only now have 2 legitimate stage shows that are promoter-led in Jamaica, Sumfest and Rebel Salute. Things have changed. Dancers have always been a part of dancehall culture, as I reflected on Cool Ravers, Chavoy Grant. Dances have also always been a part of dancehall culture and the proliferation of rhythms. Things are very different now because we have had a significant explosion in all 3 of these because of the interest both in the dances and in the dancers, as well as in the music. And as I said, the access and the democratization of access to all of these. So things are more visible, and we have locations like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, to thank for a lot of this. And in a lot of the research I'm currently doing, actors from outside of Jamaica, Europeans and others, speak about, for example, when I went to Venezuela, they speak about getting in contact with what is dancehall and who are dancehall individuals and what represents dancehall culture through YouTube. They've never been to Jamaica, but they understand dancehall, and they are parodying dancehall and teaching dancehall from the internet. So what are some of the things that are associated with dancehall thematically? And I developed a discussion sometime in 2010, 2011 about the 6 themes, 6 Gs plus others in dancehall. Gun, and this is a very masculine theme, violence and aggression, discussed in various ways through dancehall culture. Gal, sex, sexuality, male, female sexuality, the sex act, erotic act, and all of these things that come out in dancehall culture. The inner city, the ghetto, the gully, the garrison, the trench. Poverty, a very, very important social issue in dancehall, has come out very strongly since the outset, since the beginning of dancehall. Bounty Killer, for example, has been immortalized for being a very important voice in carrying the songs of poverty, many of which were written by Dave Kelly. But Bounty Killer becomes a very important vehicle in carrying that song. And I remember being a graduate student in the Department of Government, working with then Professor Rupert Lewis, Professor Emeritus now, and carrying Bounty Killers any time that was banned on radio because it was felt that this song had anti-systemic properties and could lead to social unrest. Teaching my students in that course Caribbean political thought, that song, and working through the themes in that song to understand what was Bounty Killer really saying. Anytime you're hungry again, you're going to see me nine. Poor people, police out the road and a fight crime. Holiday I come and me not see the next dime. And there was a huge discussion around it at that time in the social imagination as to Bounty Killer inciting riot and unrest. Dancehall speaks a lot about gays, and I speak to it as the anti-male homosexual discourse, a very masculine discourse that attempts in many ways, in the same way they speak about female sexuality, to elevate male heterosexuality, a very hegemonic masculine discourse in many instances that has often bordered on the fatal, and which has now been pushed into repression based on a lot of activities both internally and externally, and the kind of political correctness that has descended on dancehall as a part of course, its development and its maturity in the 21st century. Ganja is a very big discussion in dancehall. I speak about it in an entire week of two lectures in one of my courses. Now that since 2015 it has been decriminalized for personal use, religious use, and also a medical marijuana. As arena has been opened up, things are different. Dancehall speaks about ganja in many ways as a social category, a popular category. Weed, highest high grade, it make you fly without visa and all these such delights. Very popular theme in dancehall. God, yes, and cartel people will understand some of these things. I'm singing partially cartel. Yes. Mm-hmm. I love how you roll up when you curl up, all of these things. God, Jah Father Selassie, very spiritual turn as well that comes out because, again, dancehall artists are Jamaicans, you see, and they also engage with discussions around spirituality and the desires to be supported spiritually, and it comes out a lot in the music. The clash theme is very popular and remains so in dancehall, both in the songs and in the activities. With the demise of Sting and such arenas, one of the things that has become important is the clash that takes place in social media. And I think some of us have to understand that clash has not disappeared from dancehall. It has been moved to the new frontier. Social media is a new frontier where everything takes place. And so we have had clashes where Mavada and who has clashed? They have clashed on social media. People have won and lost the rivalries. They engage both in deliberations through song as well as, of course, in the kind of verbal activity with the support of their fans and, of course, with the onlooking eyes of others who are just taking part in the activity. So clash takes place very deliberately in dancehall. You also have the clash of dancers, the clash of divas, and the clash of other activities in dancehall culture. And one of the things that we saw recently was the clash of values that took place between the legal fraternity and dancehall, as indicated through that letter from Council Champagne that has sparked this discussion. Mama becomes a very important category in dancehall, and most artists, male and female, have at least one treatise to Mama, speaking to a very important social category of support, as well as the kind of gendered understanding of female as critically important in the lives of people in Jamaica. Mama, especially single mama, is spoken about as an almost revered category in all dancehall, in many dancehall treatises. Bling bling, conspicuous consumption, materialism, also reflecting on social mobility. Everybody wants to bust, buy a big house, buy a big car, live on the hill, and make mama happy. And this comes out a lot. Everybody wants to have money flossing, throwing dollars around, lying in bathtubs full of money, showcasing this through champagne and expensive liquors. And it's funny, but remember, it's also an expression of desires for better lives by people who come mainly from the poorest and the lowest levels of the working classes. So it's funny, and we marry it to a discussion on what happens, for example, in hip-hop culture, but we have to understand that many of these themes are also articulating real desires of individuals on the ground to live better lives. So this is also reflecting in many ways on the class structures that we engage with here in Jamaica, where individuals feel pressured to move out of their marginalized states and to live lives that are highly placed on various hills that are often narrated. I have to buy a big house up a stony hill. We understand the remainder of that statement. Now, inside of dancehall is also reflections on the female body in different ways. And the category of dancehall queen, which has now also been rendered as a kind of reflection in dancehall dance on a specific type of dancing, the erotic female dancing. It is now called dancehall queen style, originated mainly with dancehall queen Carlene, and that is her figured many years ago as a poster girl for Slam Condoms in her signature red outfit. She had a yellow one, a red one, a black one. Yeah, those are very signature outfits. And on the right of it is Junko Kudo, and why I have Junko Kudo there is that Junko Kudo becomes the first non-Jamaican woman to win the then dancehall queen competition in Montego Bay. It caused a huge row in Jamaica. But what it also signaled in 2002 was that there were other individuals who were now competing locally and globally for space inside of the dancehall. And this is a precursor to some of what we would see with our Mona Law students. So we have men and women, and now we have women from all over the world who are international dancehall queens. Italy, I was in Portugal for the first dancehall queen competition, dancehall queen competitions in Berlin. Most European states have at least one dancehall queen competition in their capital cities. Some of them have more than one. So this dancehall queen iconic representation where the female body is at one point posed and staged in a very erotic form and then translates into dance styles that have been immortalized as a part of dancehall culture is something that has moved beyond the shores of Jamaica, come out of the inner cities, out of dancehall culture, and has made its way elsewhere. And I suggest that it has also come back to us in some of the poses that we saw of the 6 young women who were staged in dancehall dress on Mona Law's Society's stage. This is old school dancehall fashion. People are laughing. This is from the 90s, guys. 1998 was the year when Jamaica went to World Cup, wasn't it? It wasn't that year, but they got World Cup, wasn't it? 98? People who are not yet born don't have to respond. Dancehall was very big. Those girls, the Ouch crew, and Brock Up is behind them, he was a dancer, were very popular. They were fashion designers. They had a store at Skateland Plaza in Half a Tree. They were very popular. And they were also very particularly involved with what was going on with the reggae boys and all of that. Shabba Ranks is my favorite artist. So people know this. So I always have Shabba Ranks in my present. I mean, I love Cartel and everybody, but I'm old school. So that's why Shabba is there. But also to showcase the kind of fashion. And what I'm looking at here is also that at that time, at the start of dancehall in the 80s through the 90s, we were using our own fashion designs. These are created style. These are fashions and costumes that were created by local designers and made by hand, custom-made fashion. What we are having today is a different kind of fashioning of the body. So we are going back to the importation of brand names where we are all standardized and dressed in the same clothing and articulating our own differences. But in that era, men were dressing, and this was a linen and lace era for men at that time. Everybody, and Pinchers was very popular for the linen and lace costumes. But of course, things change and we move forward. Let's talk a little bit about contemporary dancehall. Dancehall has been transformed, and in the post-millennial era, we have a different version of dancehall. And one of the things that I've been looking at since, and I made a presentation in 2011 and spoke about this, is that perhaps we're at the end stage of dancehall. Things have changed. Still highly competitive. The clash is still there. Dance crews, DJs, divas, and others. It now has a very significantly developed business ethos, very significant. This is something that and I underline it and underscore it. Go on Instagram and you'll see a young woman dressed in all kinds of fashion, hair, nails, and inside of the Instagram post, hair by, nails by, outfit by, no, it's not funny, and they are usually either paid to model these outfits, or they are given the outfits and the costume for free as a part of their promotion of self as a dancehall individual who has many followers. These are individuals with thousands of 80,000 followers, 200,000 followers. Remember that Spice hit the stratosphere with 1 million followers. So these are women, men and women. They are modeling costumes, they are showcasing products, they are highlighting products, and there's now a significant business ethos, not just only at the higher levels where we have a larger incursion of educated middle-class young people, but also at the lower levels where we have working class and young men and women from the inner cities who are significantly involved. And so we also have the very important weekly events. So we have Monday, we have Uptown Mondays. Tuesdays, we have Sexy Tuesdays and Bossy Tuesdays. Wednesday, right, and we have a whole list of them, right? Day Rave Thursdays and All-Star. So we have a lot of events in Kingston and outside of Kingston that are also oriented around that business ethos and which are branded. All-Star is branded by Boom. So we have all of these various Wednesdays. We have all of these individual entities that brand with dancehall. Epicon, the marijuana company, medical marijuana products, recently staged an event where they were going to be marrying with dancehall, and they signed a dancehall artist as their main ambassador. Who did they sign again? I don't know. All right, you're with me. The erosion of the traditional promoter, where we only now have 2 traditional promoter stage shows, Reggae Sumfest and Rebel Salute, which particularly Reggae Sumfest still pays homage, and now under Joe Bogdanovich pays homage to dancehall culture. Erosion of traditional sites of earning, album sales, local stage shows, along with the kind of visa restrictions, means that, again, individuals have been searching for additional routes to earn resources. Male colonization of dancehall center, the increasing number, for example, of male dance crews inside of dancehall. And I want to reflect on this very particularly because while we have had male dancers throughout the years, Laba Laba, who I saw last week Wednesday, Laba Laba is a much older, almost 70-year-old male dancer, Bogle, of course, being a very important, iconic figure. Dancing and that posing in the center of dancehall under the video light, and I use that picture very particularly, was reserved for the female body. And the positioning, the eroticization, the dancing by women. What we have today is a significant colonization of dancehall center in increasing numbers by male dance crews, who are also entrepreneurs who are traveling abroad, who are teaching workshops abroad, and who are earning resources, but who have also taken over the center spaces of dancehall. So when you attend the dancehall events, the women, especially local dancers, have to increasingly battle for space and for attention inside of dancehall. And if you look, for example, at some of the dancehall dance events that are taking place outside of Jamaica and Europe, the percentage of female to male dancers, 20% to 80%. Similar to what we have here at the university, except it is reversed. So we have 80%, 20% female to male ratio here on campus. Now we have 20%, 80% female to male ratio in the dancehall. So there's something there. Maybe some of the young men are out there dancing and doing other things that are considered far more easily accessible. New income generating sites for men and women, and I spoke about that, product placement, dancing, branding, etc. The erosion of traditional male bodies, our traditional male taboos, and I put that thing is a Blue Bomber cake soap. Right, guys? And what am I imputing? And what am I imputing with the Blue Bomber cake soap for those who are not on? There are people in the audience who do not understand what I'm imputing. I'm imputing cute, like me wash my face with my cake soap rubbing, also known as skin bleaching, which Vibes Cartel heightened, elevated, and legitimized for men in Jamaican culture. He actually did that. And so one of the taboos that we have always worked with in Jamaica is that there would be only female activity around certain kinds of fashion products and activities. Women lightened their skin. Women engaged in cosmetic artifice. Women paid more attention to how they were costumed and how they were coordinated. But as we get closer into the new millennium, what we find happening is that artists and men who are important in dancehall culture, like Vybz Kartel, the incarcerated teacher, encourages through music, but not just through music, also through their own activity, what was a growing trend in the inner city culture, in dancehall culture, and projects it forward. And so this becomes an important part of what happens in dancehall culture. People are now expressing themselves, suggesting that they are also fashion bodies and are, in a sense, disporting themselves in various ways. And I have there's a discussion that I had last week. Everything is so all together. Transitory masculinities, where I'm working through what kind of thesis that is coming up. Joseph, we're going to talk. Yes, about how this new wave of how men position themselves in dancehall, which is a very extremely traditional location, impacts on who we are as a people. And now we are here. Dancehall as masquerade, and I have it as a question sign. And I have this poster, which I pulled from 2017. I collect these things routinely because they mean something to me. So the first time I saw this poster in August 2017 of a big uptown dance, and I read the poster, it meant something to me because it suggested that we are using dancehall as a kind of masquerade and performing an identity that carries with it multiple implications inside of the same local spaces that the individuals who live these identities are existing. So it's in real time. You know what I'm saying? In real time. And for me, when I reflected on it and reflected on some of the discussions we are having, it seemed to me as if we were almost engaging in a kind of blackface activity, which usually causes a lot of problems and quarrels in places like the USA when this is enacted. And so we are told on this poster, which very clearly locates it in Kingston 6, which in Jamaica we understand to be uptown. And it also says it on the poster very clearly, uptown. The poster says it very clearly, you know. Big uptown dance. And since my glasses are somewhere that they shouldn't be, I'm going to look at this. Get a fabulous theme. Dress code as ghetto as you want to be. The individual, no, it's not funny. I didn't find it funny. What I did, I reflected. I was about to do an entire paper on this poster because the individuals who crafted this poster are very clear in their understanding of the position of dancehall. The rest of us may all be pretending. They are very clear in identifying what they are doing as masquerade, as sort of hopping across a border in costume where they do not belong. And they have located it very carefully. And why do they do that? Because the person who did this poster understands how dancehall culture is positioned still in this society. This is a 2017 party. And I have friends who went to this party and who dressed as ghetto as they want to be. I didn't see many of the pictures from this party or many of the videos, but I kept the poster because for me it suggested that there was a sort of appropriation in a real sense of dancehall fashion style and codes of behavior into a kind of entertainment category that we could, for example, say, similar to how we utilize Carnival from Trinidad, which has an entire history, an entire set of social debates, an entire set of activities that are tied to how that society has developed, and even an entire historiography that comes from Europe, where it was brought into the region. So there's an understanding that dancehall culture is this. It's a place where people talk a lot about individuals who are at the lowest levels of Jamaica's class structures. We are a very rigidly class society, and I see a debate developing again around this discussion on class, and there is a rejection of this debate. We are not a class society. Carl Stone's work is still relevant. It's still the only work on class that we have in Jamaica. late 1970s, I'm making the call again, there is urgent need for some updated work on the class structures. And so the uptown versus downtown dichotomy is a very clear discussion that we engage in terms of how we reflect on how people are dressed in dancehall, in how we, for example, see signs put up at places like the hospitals, no dancehall dress. And you have been to several institutions. The hospitals have these signs. A lot of schools have these signs. And there's an understanding that there's a particular thing called dancehall dress, which more than likely, in the minds of these officials, will also be accompanied by dancehall people behaving like dancehall people. There's a kind of cycle of intellectual reflection that goes with these signs. And when I sent in my article to the Observer, I sent this with them. I said, well, the young ladies have been put up all over the world, but I wanted this to go with my article. Well, they put something else. So the Mona Law students, as a part of Jamaica, and as young women and young men who, based on their movement into the law fraternity, are going to be positioned in a very oppositional way in the minds of Jamaicans to a dancehall adherent, I'll use that word. And that picture on the right is a picture of Dancehall Queen Danger, who many of you would have seen recently in the Star, pregnant and dancing. This is a less recent picture of her. And on the left are photographs of how many of us imagine lawyers at work. They don't always dress like that, but we still utilize the wig. And don't we still utilize it? No, we still. Many of us say, right, fully dressed. We have rejected the wig finally. And so one of the challenges that comes with that idea of dancehall as masquerade, in terms of how we position the uptown versus downtown dynamics, is how we underscore very carefully when we are putting it out in the public imagination. What is the purpose of this particular costume? Is it for play? Are we play acting? Or are we indeed not legal luminaries, but dancehall women who are attending events in a real sense? This is Dancehall Queen Danger outside of an event. And she has 8 pictures, I think, on that particular slide. I took the one where she's turned her back. Because remember that when we imagine and we imitate these poses, that we are not just play acting a moment in a historical representation of life. What we are doing is that we are actually tackling with all the values, the challenges, and the clashes that come with a reflection, for example, on someone like Dancehall Queen Danger. And so for me, how do we then reflect on some of these things, How do we reflect on dancehall as masquerade? Can we actually play act dancehall as Jamaicans in the 21st century? Can a Jamaican actually play act dancehall with all the different values, the different codes, the different gendered cues, and the different clash of social values that are still a part of dancehall culture? How do we reflect on it? Has it escaped? And I asked the question, I've been asking the question since the 22nd of February. Has dancehall transitioned to be something that has been fully absorbed in the upper reaches of the society? Is it on its way to absorption? Because it obviously seems that there is a move that dancehall is at its end stage, and I've been reflecting on this for some time. However, based on the response, the very patriarchal response to the young women, not the young men, in dancehall dress, based on the kind of heated debate that we were all engaged in across different platforms, and taking different positions, oppositional, supportive, and otherwise, dancehall culture still remains, even while I suggest that it is in an intercessory moment, trending towards hegemonic absorption, which would then open the spaces for a new form of Jamaican music, a new genre to be named. It seems that dancehall culture still remains, for us in Jamaica, now a post-millennial musical culture that carries with it, in a real sense, the kind of challenges and the kind of anti-systemic values in the main that seek to clash with the society, seek to clash with the kind of traditional values that are associated with the higher levels of the society, and which give us a lot of cues as to how many individuals are working out their own lives in a kind of pseudo-capital. Jamaica is not fully capitalist. We are trying to figure ourselves out, but certainly we are not. We are post-colonial, trying to be capitalist society. We are not fully capitalist because we would then not have all the discussions about what we should fund as social activities on behalf of other people. But a very capitalist-induced formation that tackles a lot of the issues that are important in Jamaica, particularly for people at the base of the society, but uses again those themes that I identified in very deliberate ways as a part of this discussion, even while we understand that dancehall is on a transition. And so in my concluding thoughts, I still concluded a lot of questions. Can a Jamaican really play act at dancehall? And can a Jamaican who is positioned in a more elite segment of Jamaican society or perceived to be positioned there, play act dancehall without underscoring, as many of my friends do? I see them on the powerful men and women perform for charity, play acting dancehall, but the title of that event is perform. And so it is very clear that they are play acting for a moment. They have not become absorbed into what is considered to be, still by many in Jamaica, dirty dancehall. I leave it there. Thank you so much. Did I talk for like, how long did I talk for? I talked for like 40 minutes.
Oh, it didn't matter. Thank you so much, Professor Hope, for that excellent primer. Before we hear from our panelists and then open up the floor, and just before we open up the floor, we're going to hear from a poem from Tavia Benjamin. But I think let us take the response first to the lecture, and then we'll hear from you and open up the floor, and I'm sure that we'll have a range of comments. We have two commentators today. The first is Chuck Cameron, who you heard mentioned earlier in the session. And Mr. Cameron is a lawyer of over 2 decades. He has a master's in information technology for lawyers, and he has a mixed practice which includes entertainment law, constitutional law for the constitutional law students, the Gerville Williams and Indicom case, which you learn is one which he litigated, also administrative law, commercial law. He's been recently engaging in a range of conversations on topics which should be interesting to us here, including the playing of Vibes Cartel on the radio, during his imprisonment. In addition to being an attorney, he's a founding member of what's known as JARIA. Is it sounded JARIA? And for 5 years, his focus has moved and shifted to the entertainment business. He founded a company, Digital Dubs, which streams events such as Fully Loaded and the International Reggae Day some 13 years ago to international audiences. He's one of the co-founders of Ready TV, the first fully locally owned island-wide wireless cable company. Immediately after Mr. Cameron, you'll hear from Nadeen Spence, who is a very familiar figure for us on the university campus. She's an educator, social and political commentator, and women's rights activist. She's a thoughtful and fearless commentator on the issues which matter. She's also the Student Services and Development Manager on the campus of the Women's Hall, Mary C. Cole Hall. Her interest is significantly in young people's leadership, and she currently develops and delivers leadership programs for undergraduates and graduates at the university, and she's the founder and Executive Director of I Am Glad I'm a Girl Foundation. She's worked assiduously to ensure that Mona is a space where women and men are safe, empowered, and also lead. I'm going to start with Mr. Cameron.
Good afternoon, all. I'm very grateful to be invited to be part of this conversation, and more importantly, I'm glad that I got a front seat to hear Dr. Hope present. For I shared with Dr. Hope when she said that, in my mind, she has now made the university relevant in Jamaica today. For me personally, before now, my personal position is that tertiary institutions in Jamaica are irrelevant. And I'm a very dramatic speaker, so please forgive me, but I would like you to understand my point of view. As a law student, I couldn't keep awake in any class. So I did not go to class because for me, it was a waste of time. All your, but there's, no, remember where I started. I said university is now relevant, so. And the challenge was you're only required to pass the exams. And if you did anything else, or if you dare to think, you were punished for intellectual thought in a tertiary institution. So for me, Dr. Hope has now made university relevant. And I'm glad I got that crash course. I'm glad I'm not in the same space, so there can be no comparison whatsoever with my presentation and her presentation. I am simply a commentator. So as a child growing up, going to Mona Prep, going to Campion, living in Kingston 6, I don't know how I was aware, and when there was only one TV station and two radio stations, I don't know how I became aware of the fact that there was a life and a world and a culture outside of what we were exposed to living in Kingston 6. Because at that time, reggae music, neither reggae music or the makings of dancehall were played on our radio stations. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. If you could understand that. I'm not saying dancehall. I'm not only saying that dancehall wasn't played. I'm saying that reggae music was not played. But they need to understand the world that we're living in and where we're coming from, and why I said the university is now relevant. My parents are not here, but I have two family members here. But I don't know how, but I found out that there was an alternative world that the majority of people participated in. So as a young high school student, I would find myself at Stone Love on a Wednesday night. And that was at the original House of Lear. There are very few people who would know what House of Lear was. And then House of Lear moved. But when the first G in the 6 Gs of dancehall, that was, at that period of time, it wasn't necessarily anything negative. It was nothing negative at all. It was a part of the dance hall. It was a natural part of the dance hall. So when you go to a dance now, and you see lighters, and you see this thing named lighter, That is what a dance would look when gunshots are being fired as a gun salute. So that was a natural part of our culture. Natural. And I call it, notice, our culture, because that's what I was aware of and that's what I submerged myself in. So fast forward today, me as an attorney, I left civil practice after practicing with Craft and Miller for five years. I did my master's in information technology and management for lawyers. No one understood how I ended up doing my thesis in the maximization of wealth for the music industry, a digital alternative. The two don't seem to coincide, but that's what I ended up doing my master's in. Again, university, postgraduate studies must be relevant. I couldn't research something that was foreign to me, that wasn't relevant to me, that I didn't think I was contributing to. Coming out of that research, I realized that there was at the stage, at that time, very little local academia or academic study around the subject of reggae, much less dancehall. And again, I go back to thanking Dr. Hope for making the university relevant for me personally. As a practicing attorney, I've had the luxury of seeing where our society, through our legislation and through our laws, are shaping our culture unbeknownst to us. We need to be one, even if we don't call it our culture, we need to be aware of what is the status quo. Even if you don't call it your culture, you must know what is out there and start from that point of view. About 3 years ago, the government of Jamaica had passed the Anti-Gang Legislation Act. In that legislation, there was a section 15 that sought to criminalize any producer or any artist who mentioned the name of a Don. That was it. Nothing more than that. The fundamental question or problem I had with that was, okay, so who is a Don? There was at the time, and to date, there is no list of persons identified. There's no definition of a Don, 1. 2, and there's no list of persons who have been criminally convicted of being a Don. So if it is, you had gone into a studio and called anybody's name, and the police say, that man is a Don, you know. The producer and the artist would have been exposed to criminal sanction. So I thought it necessary to write and be vocal on that. Unfortunately, it was ultimately withdrawn after a whole lot of debate and back and forth. But as law students, as young persons, we must be aware of the role that you play in, forget about protecting our culture, but just protecting the freedom of expression. Because if no one had raised a voice, today, I don't know that we'd have dancehall. Because there's no way any producer, or there's no way, I have my son in here, there's no way I could allow my son or my nephew to produce any type of music, knowing that there's a possibility that they can go to jail if somebody's name is called. That's the sort of impact it would have had. So I also address the issue of the whole playing of Cartel's music while he was incarcerated. But I'm not really going to touch on that. I'm going to jump into the deep part in terms of the association with culture and the law. So for those of us who have studied, the law students who have studied the law, you'd understand that our Constitution comes from what is known as our GRU norm. At the end of the day, what that word Gumnar means is our culture. That is what our constitution emanates from. What are those set of principles? What is the status quo? What are those terms that we have agreed upon that we will live by? And what are we agreeing to protect? What do people have a right to do? So culture doesn't sit over on the left side and law on the right side with nothing to do. Coming out of the letter that Mr. Champagny wrote, and if anyone had an opportunity to read my response, I sought to use the opportunity to make that connection, because very often when we ask for, we want justice, we want justice, we want justice, there are two things that people think about in Jamaica when we think about law and justice and the Constitution. One, economic and social justice. We need water, we need light, we need basic living conditions, and then he should get a fair hearing. But our Constitution doesn't stop there. Our Constitution does not stop there. That's not the only thing that we agreed on. Our Constitution, all of us agreed as a society that we have a right to express ourselves. We have a right to, having expressed ourselves, to be free of any discrimination. Those rights are no less of import than that of the right to a fair trial. So when students play, and I'm the same note that Dr. Hope ended on, that's a fundamental question I have as well. My question is, so what if the law students were not play acting? So what if they were not masquerading? So it is okay, and it's now accepted, and one can confidently argue that they should not be corrected because they are play acting, because they are masquerading. So what if they were not play acting? What if it was either Caroline or what's her name? The Japanese dancehall queen, Junko Kuno. No man, so don't laugh at me, because back in the day, as a young lawyer, in the Irish and Chin, they put it on a Thursday. Is that Friday or Thursday? It's during the week. I would jump in my car, drive to Mobe for the Irish and Chin dancehall contest, and drive back home. So I just don't remember, I'm not good with names, so forgive me. But yes, I would drive out there in the middle of the week to come back for work, because that is a part of our rich culture. So in closing, because I don't have 35 minutes, I have 7 minutes. The question that I want us to grapple with in the context of our constitutional rights is, so what? What would be the position today if it is those students were not play acting? If it is those were persons who live, I don't remember all the nice words that Dr. Hope used, but participate in that life. And that is, if they get up late, apart from going to school, if they weren't going to school, they'll be getting up late, and then they'll be going to bed at 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock after them come from the dance, and they have several children, and they get paid by how many children they have and live a life like that. So what if those law students, would the law faculty have them as law students? Thank you very much for the opportunity, and thank you, Doctor. Thank you for facilitating this conversation where our competing ideas can contend, and thank you very much to the other presenters and panelists.
I'm going to invite Ms. Spence for the law students. Grun norm means the culture. The university is relevant. I hope you're applying that to the Faculty of Law too.
Hello, everybody. So I come from country, right? I never grew up with dancehall. I grew up with Barry G on radio. And I grew up without dancehall as a backdrop, a context, or even a situation that would allow me to develop an appreciation for it. I come from a place called Kilmarnock. And after I grew up, it was I always tell people in St. Elizabeth, thanks to the rural electrification program, I eventually got electricity. So there are some people like us in Jamaica. We are not all Kingston and savvy and go to any of and live in this kind of environment. There are still people in Jamaica who get up and draw water and put it on them head and figure out them life after that. I remember a couple of years ago, I went home to visit my parents in Kilmarnock, and I was driving my posh new Kia, and my father's donkey was parked alongside, and I said, my ride then and my ride now. One of the things I remember most profoundly about Kingston was that when I was young, I used to go to festival, and festival was in Black River. And there was one bus in my community, Mass Vivian van. And Mass Vivian van was used for everything. So on this day, my school was going to enter festival, and when they were going down, they did 2 trips with the one van, because it's one van in the community. But when they were coming back, they packed everybody in the same bus. So I developed a kidney problem from that. My kidney started bleeding, and I spent 2 months at the Bustamante Children's Hospital. What was profound about that was that this was 1980, when Jamaica was in the middle of its political war. And so I developed a relationship with Gunshot, where my mother swore that she was going to come to Kingston when she could make it to visit me, and I was going to be shot and dead on the hospital bed. That's one. The other thing is that when I was doing one of my visits back to clinic at Bustamante, on one occasion I was wearing an orange dress, and somehow or the other my dress became a threat to the bus, because everybody decided that they would not go further than Old Harbour with me in my orange frock. So my mother, who never had much money, had to stop and find a store in Old Harbour to buy an appropriate dress, because I couldn't come to Kingston in an orange dress. So I have all kinds of thoughts about urban spaces and urban people. I don't like them much. And the reason why I'm in Kingston, yes, the reason why I'm in Kingston is because all the resources of this country is spent developing this one space. So some of us who view Kingston with heavy resentment are forced to live here and engage in the weird traditions of the Kingstonians, such as dancehall. So I'm very ambivalent about dancehall. In fact, I never participated in it till Donna forced me to in Caribbean Political Thought, when I had to do that anytime you're hungry again, me I go sip. So that's sad. Yes. I never liked it, I still don't. It's not a part of my culture. Not all of us in Jamaica embrace it or like it. I think it's too much of everything that I was taught not to value. And I do not feel embarrassed for saying that. I appreciate it, and when I was on campus, I used to break out occasionally. But I knew how to put that in perspective. And so I want to say, the second thing I want to say is, is that I always call law a legal fraternity, with the emphasis on the fraternity, a profession that has not really made space for women. That's my critique. So I wasn't surprised, despite the fact that women are in there. Gender equality is not a numbers game. It's not the number of women that makes it a woman-friendly space. Is what it is, and what it becomes when women become a part of it. That's the first thing I'd like to say. Secondly, or perhaps thirdly no, is that I kind of did like the fact that everybody did a beat down on the last student, because they're going to let them better everybody else on campus. That's just like I have a niece here. The moment you get the letter that says law, these students are transformed into these beings that say, I'm in the faculty of law, and somehow I'm better than. And so I never minded the kind of I was like, yes, the same thing what you do to people, them I do back to you. Yes, that's the name. It's called discrimination. You do it all the time. And so people are doing. But I said that, and then I said to myself, no, you know, there's a way in which we have to address that as well, what that means. But and I thought of defending the students, and I was going to go at it and really take on Champagne, and then I said, no, because I'm in a space that is very anti-thought. And it's very anti-thought for me because it's anti-feminist. And so I'm the feminist on campus. Everybody knows this. I woke up one morning when I was, some 3 years ago, and some apostolic students were praying out the spirit of feminism. They were pointing in the direction of Mary Seacole Hall. And they were engaged in apoplectic fits about the spirit of feminism that now was over by Mary Seacole Hall. And so, as the hated feminist on campus, I have come also to recognize and understand how anti-thought this space is, and how when we do not give our students frames of analysis, as I got in Department of Government, so that even though I am not necessarily a fan of dancehall, I taught it with Ragashanti, and I was a tutor in that course for 3 years, because it taught me about another reality that was Jamaican. And I understood the importance of giving our students frames of analysis so that when they are faced with certain kinds of realities, they have language to describe what they are faced with. And I think one of the things that we are not doing sufficiently at UE is giving our students language to understand the realities that they are engaged with. So that if those students I proffer, for example, knew that fraternity means brotherhood, they would understand why law as a fraternity can be so hostile to women's bodies. You get that through feminist discourse. I think if they had language as well, they would understand patriarchy and the fact that universities are famously patriarchal, and that women's entry in universities is in fact very recent. Our university is quite revolutionary in the sense that it allowed women in when it was open. There were other universities who struggled up to the 1970s for women to become equal citizens in those spaces. And I think women need to know that when they come to a place like the university, because we tend to think that, again, gender equality is a numbers game. So one of the things I keep hearing here is that men are marginalized, and I'm waiting to see the manifestation in that beyond the registration numbers. Gender equality is not a numbers game. It's a matter of how or the spaces that we populate and the people in them impact the lives of the people around them. So, I know I'm going to say something, I hope. Forgive me. So to me, the idea that UE has very ghetto spaces in it was something I always, you remember Mr. What the man name? Marty Perkins always said it. And it's true. Like, it's true. It's true for a number of reasons. Let me tell you why I call it an intellectual ghetto. About 3 years ago, I went over to Chancellor and took some pictures of their pantry tree. I hear they're restarting it. Yes, yeah, about 3 years ago. I think that is ghetto. To me, those are the things that makes a space like this ghetto. I have several other examples of the ways that we, in this space called the university, do not understand the different ways we manifest our identity. So one of the things I'd like to say, and you say, somebody around you say, I'm from the ghetto, and just like how I say I come from country. I remember the first time I walked over to social sciences, there were some students from Campion, I think it was Campion, under the suicide tree. And they were playing dominoes, I think. And just the way they referred to country people, I almost dropped from Department of Government second floor. Like, right at that moment, I felt like, okay, you see, for the place, you know, I have to be careful how I walk, because then people are not like country people. Just the things they said about people from rural spaces made me recognize that it wasn't a place that welcomed everybody, and that it had a fixed identity, and that you either fit into that fixed identity or you were on the outskirts of it. So if we were to investigate Donna's idea, sorry Donna, for where she mentioned law as masquerade, it would suggest that the students were perhaps performing. This wasn't who they were, and for a moment, they delved into this space called the dance hall, and they were judged harshly for it. But one of the things I'd like us, especially those of us who work here, to do is to look at where our students come from here. Like the idea that UWI is this ivory tower, and our students come from these. I don't know if it ever was that, to be honest. But I'm also going to impose another interpretation on that. But this idea that the university student is this mindless millennial who is selfish and has nothing to worry about is an American imposition, and the idea of the college co-ed, which became popular, I think, in the 1990s, that these are students who just dance and party senselessly and drink. That's drink senselessly. I think there's a way in which we have imposed that idea on who our university students are. And in fact, I suggest that this is not so. I think we have to go beyond that Americanized version of who the university student is, and really look at the students who are here by looking at where they come from and what is particular to those spaces. I remember a couple of years ago, one of the things I started to do when I discovered a trend at Sequel was I started to put on the form that students signed in. When was the last funeral in your family? Who was it, and how did the person die? And then after a while I stopped, because that in itself was triggering. And what I discovered from that is that so many of our students were coming to UWI who had lost relatives violently and who were traumatized in different ways by being on the campus, because we were so close to so many spaces that they thought were not safe. And so I think that we have to delve a little bit more into who our students are and how the realities at home have impacted them. And I'm saying that as well because I think if we perhaps understood who they were, then we would see what happened with the students in law as less of a performance and perhaps more of a statement of who some of them are. Perhaps not all of them, but this is definitely who some of them are. And is law comfortable with their students, with the identity of women, of being women of the dance hall? Are they comfortable with that? And then the last thing I want to say is, I touched on it a little bit. I don't know if you know, right in front of Juicy Patty's a couple of years ago, I don't know now, was called Beverly Hills, and across the road was called Brooklyn Extension. They still use those terms, depicting uptown and downtown. Right in front of Juicy Patty's. That was seen as where the upper class students hung out, or the high society students hung out. And then across from there, which was where Philip Sherlock's monument is, there was another identity of students who hung out there. And one of the things, I'm saying that to say that a lot of our spaces on campus Okay, I'm done now. Just saying this, a lot of our spaces are on campus are in fact very classed, and the students occupy them based on their class identity. And I think a lot of what this is also about are the class identities the students bring to the campus, and then how the campus reinforces and supports those. I went way over, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadeen. And before we open up for about 10 minutes of discussion with the panel, I wanted to invite Tavia Benjamin to do a poem. Tavia is a poet, a student as well, Tavia, a motivational writer, a self-published author of the book Words Beyond the Page. She uses poetry as a means of self-expression, personal development, to motivate others, and to self-reflect and to benefit from the experiences of others. Can I offer you the floor?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. The name of this poem is called Music Revolution, and I wrote it just after listening to a discussion about where dancehall culture started. A lot of the things they spoke about, I knew nothing about because clearly the milk is still on my mouth. This is the revolution of the music. Bring back the big, dirty, stinking dancehall to the communities. Don't be afraid of the evolution of the youth cracking the space and owning their identity. Listen not to those who sit outside the realities we live, nor allow them to blur our vision with their perception and illusion of indecency. Those nincompoops sit behind their inflated sense of learnedness. They're ignorant and carry on with an overwhelming level of cockiness, then tell us when we speak about cock we are pussyfooting our own decency. They don't want the music to be alive. They inject blood clots into mainstream dancehall and block the organic flow of self-expression, identity, and culture. They are anti-family, against the very chords that build the Jamaica they speak fondly of, as though the lyrical dexterity of the art were not what bred their mothers and pushed them into a world held together by the notes of the Robin Hood rude boy wailers and sexy women dancing behind closed doors. We are the dancehall. We will forever live in a documentary and will continue to document it. We define our story and tell it best from the notes in our head to the roots in our beats. For if ever they tell us we are not noble, and they have no time nor place to accommodate us, we shall stand amidst their judgments, string up the sound, draw a crowd, and turn up the basis of our existence. So, Mr. and Mrs. Cultureless, producers of identity theft, we are here forever. So, lest you forget, here's a record to remind you, we are the dancehall. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Tabitha. I'm going to open the floor. Sorry. Okay, so let me start with the first. Wait. So Mona Law teachers who couldn't give
Oh, are we being poor hosts? Are we being poor hosts?
Oh, you reach out the front there, Brendan.
That's right, that's not okay.
Okay, so let's start with the first round of questions. Go ahead, Ms. Delia.
All right. Good evening, everybody. All right. So, maximum respect to the presenter and the discussants. I'm sure everybody has thus far enjoyed your contributions to the discussion. All right. So, there are two things that sort of stuck with me that I'm interested in hearing from you about. So, the first I think is pretty safe. The second is a question that I'll ask, which I hope will be answered without any vitriol coming my way. All right. So to the first. So the first is for Professor Hope. The second can be for anybody, right? All right. So Professor Hope, when you spoke about dancehall as borrowed culture for uptown, it made me wonder, what is uptown allowed? What legitimate use, if any, can uptown make of dancehall? Does it belong to everybody? Could you go deeper into explaining why the blackface parallel is opposite? Is the underlying spirit the same? Is it similarly malevolent? All right, so that's the first. All right, so the second no.
So that's the question you're asking me.
Yes.
I can answer it.
And one of the things that I did very deliberately was to use, you realize I used a poster that someone else crafted. I did that very deliberately. Because in the crafting of that poster, which apparently a lot of thought went into, people sat down and made decisions as to what they would project. I didn't craft that poster. And so the decisions were reflecting on, one, even the address was there, Edgecombe, Kingston 6, Uptown, the invitation only, I hope you saw all of that, as well as things, for example, ghetto fabulous, reprehensible, and all of the terminologies were used to position, one, the person who was putting on, the individuals putting on the event, and those they were inviting as people who were not involving themselves in activities that are normative for them, but individuals who were not going to engage in play acting, whether or not they were legitimate adherents of dancehall. And they did that very deliberately because of the kind of conversations and understandings and perceptions that we have in Jamaica of the polarization of dancehall culture and its attendant values in quotes with what is considered acceptable and traditional for good Jamaicans, Jamaicans who respect certain values that are associated with the higher levels of society. So let me say again, whether or not, and I did mention in the presentation that we have always had middle class youth in dancehall, and we have now had a significant explosion of educated middle class youth in dancehall as promoters and otherwise. The profile of dancehall remains ghetto, reprehensible, lower class, and values that are unseemly. And for me, that poster captured it, which is why I ended with a question. Can law students who are now highly positioned, as Nadeen reminds us, once they enter the fraternity of law, even before they graduate, can they legitimately play act? Can Jamaicans masquerade dancehall? How do we deal with the kind of clash of values and profiles that are going to be at work in front of us? Is there a necessity to underline this performative aspect, as we see many of the women, for example, who pretend to be dancehall divas, like my good friend Alone, a Samba, former minister, foreign minister, ambassador, and all of these things, play act being a dancehall queen in full costume at the powerful men and women perform for charity. So again, it is how do we, because really what it is, is how the society has positioned dancehall and how we breathe life into this kind of social positioning by underlining and legitimizing the positioning of dancehall and its adherents as people who are low positioned on the scale of personhood and social and political hierarchies here in our society.
Thank you. All right, so to the second. So when you were highlighting some of the themes from dancehall, my mind latched on to men as bad men, women as hypersexual. So it makes me wonder then, so even as I'm mindful of the importance of autonomy, but I wonder your thoughts, are you plural, on whether these are legitimate roles to adopt or embrace, or whether they're problematic in terms of male-female relations, impact on prospects, and so on.
So, because I see the line, I want to take up before we respond. Paper, and we're borrowing pens. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name is Everton Bailey, ordinary Jamaican. Yes, Dr. O, in relation to male hegemony in Jamaica, and and I need to go back to about 1893 in relation to your question in terms of attendance in Jamaica. It was voted at 70-30 in 8, that is post-emancipation, meaning that all would be eligible to go to a primary school. So the enrollment would have been, the enrollment at that time, according to Miller, who did the study in 2001, was that 90% at the primary level. When it moves from the primary level to secondary, it was 65% and there was no gender disparity. Why it has moved? It has moved from 90% to 65% at secondary level. It was because of capacity. So there wasn't any much schools there building so to accommodate those. Then thereafter, when it goes to tertiary level, then we start to have the gender disparity. I come back to gender disparity now in terms of dancehall. Dancehall in Jamaica, reggae music dancehall, so to speak, in the 70s. It was a leveling, it was an activism, and it was a revolutionary at the time. Man spoke about marginalized young men in Jamaica. Dancehall was the phenomenon that would have brought and leveled the playing field, because there was, at university, there was about a couple thousand students going to university. The rhetoric at the time was that education was subsidized for the rich. So the gender disparity at university, there was made more in a female as to make at the time. So what you're actually saying then, dancehall was the only environment in which the marginalized youth could have actually propelled himself or make himself parallel to the educated minority elite, which was male at the time. So when dancehall came about, now the dancehall was looking at the social aspects of the culture. It was the one that was hitting out the sound and the poor political administration, the fragmented democracy in Jamaica. So dancehall to me is not just really a thing to be glossed over. It is a part of our culture, and now it has been a part of the culture. Those persons who have a social, a more socio-economic class, now is getting into dancehall because of the perceived opportunities, and they have actually taken the position of being the promoters who has the money. So it is a territorial thing. So dancehall to me is a multiplicity of my culture, and it's not something to be glossed over. Even the violence and crime that comes about with gun toting, it was as a result of 1970s up to the 90s. And this was as a result of cultural imperialism from all over the world. So dancehall is not something to be glossed over, to me. That is
Thank you.
Yes. So we're going to take the three other comments or questions. Oh, okay.
With the permission of those behind me, and I'll allow Stephen to just go before me.
That you want to hear from
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Iqbal Chevrier. I'm a second-year law student, and also noteworthy I'm from Spanish Town, one of the so-called inner cities of Jamaica. Right? My first particular point that I have two points I need to. I don't know if they'll be taken as questions or pointers, but let's hope they come across how I want them to. All right. So my first point was in relation to what Miss said right here. Miss Hope, thank you. The masquerading. At what point do I stop being an ordinary person from Spanish Town and cease to be from Spanish Town and start being a law student? This culture that I was grown in, I was fostered. This is who I am. I know who I am. I know this is schooling. That is where I'm from. Do I stop being from Spanish Town, this boy who was grown in this way, because I was admitted to faculty only 3 semesters ago and I'll be called to be masquerading? Why can't I be a dancehall loving law student? Why do we need to have the separation between dancehall and law? All right, so that was my first point that I needed to get across. what Miss Spence said that I found to be particularly offensive, that you referred to the university as a intellectual ghetto, right? Quoting what that it was referred to. You were echoing the sentiments, all right? What is so wrong about the ghetto? I think if larger society could foster some of these traits, such as budgeting, learning how to send your kids to school on $5,000, we would be a really better society. And I am from the inner city, right? And let me just let it be known for those of you guys who have never been there, there's no trees with panties where I'm from. And I found that to be disrespectful, and I think that when you hold spaces, you have to be mindful of the messages that you're sending to a populace that may not be from that geographic space, all right? Noteworthy, I was born in Clarendon. My father is a pastor. My mom is the first lady of a church. But I so happen to enjoy dancehall culture, right? So at what point do I stop being this church-loving boy that was grown in Spanish Town who happened to be in law school? Why is there a need to segregate all three of those identities? Why can't I enjoy the benefits of all three? Thank you.
Yes, your time.
What is your name again? What's your name? Let's remind me of your name. Iqbal, right? Yeah.
So by the way, law students are allowed to do an out-of-faculty course.
They need to come and do that.
So I was about to say that there are courses that you can do in the final year.
And there's another one called Performing Culture, Dancehall as Visual and Spectacle. You guys do great. And then we go out, we do field trips. Yeah, so like last week I went out Tuesday night with my students. We were at Sexy Tuesdays and all these nights. And so I didn't let you bed until like 6 a.m. or so. Right? Yes. We do that because it's always important because one thing that I've found teaching here on campus is that while some of you may or may not be involved in dancehall, a huge percentage of our students see dancehall as something that they should shun because of the way that it has been discoursed in the public discussion. So they are afraid of it. They've never been anywhere, but they go to the all-inclusive alcohol parties and figure out how to get drunk and crash their cars and all. So there's a dichotomy there where there's a push-pull going on. But I will respond to the question. Yeah.
Andrea,
I don't think there is a nice course advertisement about going to Sexy Tuesdays at 6 a.m. But the risk of oversimplification, and I appreciate Mr. Bailey's comment in terms of contextualizing dancehall and how it's evolved over the years. So I know this is a risk of oversimplification. It can be said that a large proportion of the content of dancehall these days is vulgar content. If you think about some of the simplest songs now, Yella Go on Nice is Too High, so we turn around and have a fashion party, right? I mean, a lot of the content, Uptown Girl them love Batman, country, I can't bother think of it. But the content of it, a lot of it is vulgar. And the question then becomes, to what extent can in a professional space one embody or reflect what in large part, and this for the whole panel, what in large part is populated by vulgar content. The space for lawyers is a professional space, the space for accountants, the space for even university lecturers, so on and so forth. So what space is there to reflect what is populated by what can largely be described as vulgar?
So you're begging for a comment immediately after that, Mr. Sheffield, but I'm going to take one more thought before I go back to the panel. Can I just see those others who wish to make a comment? Okay.
All right, before I go ahead and say what I have to say, I do think I kind of have to put out there who I am as an individual. Well, not really as an individual, but part of my, what do you call it, background, right? I'm from Dunkirk. As a little girl, I grew up, I think even Stone Up used to play at Mangate, right at Mangate. I used to But my mother, as soon as my mother gone to sleep, me sneak out from go out there and go on my business. And she come now. The only time I leave is when she come for me. Alright? So this is a girl who loves dancehall. But as a ghetto girl, right, or as a girl who grew in the ghetto, I have seen the negative and the positive, if you will. So I find it hard, while I love dancehall, trust me. And it's, you know, really, it's one of my favorite genres, right? To dance every time. I'm also a dancer, right? I do not pretend about the things that I don't like about dancehall. So, alright, I think it's not so much that we should stop talking about the wrongs of dancehall, but also, which is probably why dancehall rebels so much without contextualizing things. Our persons who are proponents of dancehall rebel so much without contextualizing things, which I think that is what Dr. Spence did. I think she rebels while contextualizing, which I like that, right? But probably what we need to do more is start to hit out against the things that surrounding things in society that take place that have a negative impact on the country, like the people in high places who support violence and who support criminal activity. We don't talk, we don't shine the light on those people who only lick out against dancehall. But then again, why I say talk about dancehall? Because dancehall must remember that, you see, most of the persons in dancehall, they come out of the ghetto, and who's feeling the effects of crime? The people in the ghetto are feeling it the most. So dancehall is out of African culture. One of the things out of African culture, it takes a village to raise a child, and dancehall must remember they are part of that village. But so I think that we need to balance it a little bit more, because you know we can talk about and let me, since it is relevant, let me speak to what happened regarding the law students. I think it was really much ado about nothing, just the same. So I just want to put that out there so you know the balance of what I'm coming with, right? Because it is sexist the way the whole thing was brought up. It is sexist. You understand? Women have a right to express themselves. And we need to start to come to terms with the sexuality of women. We're sexual creatures as well. That's another story. But then again, I may need to start to accept that. You understand? It's not one gender alone have sexual expression and needs. But let us not also forget that dancehall, the same dancehall that we're defending here today, is still the same dancehall that is sexist as well. You know, who was sideline Aishana when she said equal rights and so on, you know, and splash water on her while she was on the stage. So all I'm saying is there are two sides to it, which is why I can appreciate Dr. Spence. I don't think she was saying you as an intellectual ghetto in terms of the sprawling ghetto. I thought she meant ghetto in terms of the way we just the way we not really. You know what? Let me ask. If you will speak on it. Alright. But I have some reservations about that as well, that mentality in terms of it's just the way we do it sometimes. You understand?
I think one of the things that we have to bring.
But let me just wrap up. Okay.
Alright. There's an act of being in a space called an intellectual ghetto. And the lack of frames of analysis and ways of looking at things and appreciation of all the rights of the citizens in that space. So I'm not talking about a material ghetto, the way ghetto is located in our talk about uptown and downtown. I'm talking about how we are constructing our reality. I'm just, why is what negative?
Why is it? As to what he was saying, why is it reference to ghetto?
Okay, so I'm not going to get into that because I think you all know why. Because that is not something that I define. I'm just talking about what referring what she said in respect of explaining the idea of an intellectual ghetto.
So, I have a sense you may have things to do tonight.
Yes.
It's a Friday. Right.
All right, let me just jump off what I was saying. Right, so, and I think it's a mentality more than anything. Anyway, what I'm saying is that there's two sides to it. There is a side where, yes, we're in a class of society who keeps on holding down the dancehall and don't want to appreciate it, and it should be appreciated and welcomed, and But then again, let us also be honest about some things that are within the dancehall culture, within the ghetto culture too. You understand? Because that I know about that personally. You understand? There are some things in that need to be addressed as well. So let us not be hypocrites. That's all I'm saying.
I'm going to take the 3 quick last set of comments. Welcome to all of you, and then hand over to the panel for the wrap-up.
Very well. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Natisia Bohart Singh, and I've deliberately stayed away from this I don't know, as a lawyer. Fine, let's go there. Yes, because, as a lawyer, but many other things. I think our problem is that we have fixed ourselves in these boxes and that society ascribed to us. So yes, I'm an attorney at law by practice, but I'm Natisia Bohart Singh. No, by day. No, let me tell you that. Because and I get the impression that I always get this. So on the weekends, I look a particular way, and then I hear, but you're a lawyer. I don't understand what it has to do with anything. And I'm making a larger point here. Because when I have to go to court, I understand court attire. And when I have to go anywhere else, I am a person. I am Natisia Bohart Singh, and I am not going to wear court attire to the dancehall scene. And I have been in pageants. So let's go there, because that is what this was about. I have been in pageant. I was a former festival queen. Yes. And I've done a lot of grooming for Miss Yui, Miss Rex, Miss whatever, and we have themes. And when you have themes, like you would have an Egyptian theme, and you go to the ends of the earth to make sure you do proper research, and you are judged based on your costuming and your depth of research and how you present yourself. These things are everyday life. I didn't involve myself in any of the social media contradiction because, as somebody just said, it's much about nothing. It's about what culture is. It's about expressing yourself. And so I guess the only question I would have, because I don't want to sound like I'm trivializing it, since I'm told every day that I'm a walking contradiction. So my jacket is from Shades of Africa because I choose to wear clothes that allow me to feel like what I want to feel on my time. But I understand the court dichotomy of the lives I serve. So I'm saying, I heard the intellectual ghetto conversation, and that was the only thing I wanted to probably, if anything, have a sort of a throw on. It goes back to how we view the ghetto, because the intellectual ghetto will just obviously say that the intellectuals don't have a pride of place in the ghetto, and so we have to kind of be very careful what we latch on to and to give worth to. Because I'm from Montego Bay, though, a very humble community. In Montego Bay, I have pretty much done some of the same things, going through universities. Having done Donna Hope's course in culture, gone to Pasa too. With I'm just saying, and it doesn't make me any more or less of a person, because it is what it is. So, peace.
Before you leave, it's 2 quick comments. Yes, 2 quick comments. So, half of the panel needs to go in a few minutes. So Dion, with expedition.
Very short. My question needed more to you, Tracy.
Me?
Yes. Particularly as a final year law student and one who loves to express myself, I'm concerned particularly because of Champagne's letter. He said that our social media actions can have far-reaching effects for our profession as an attorney. No, I appreciate the fact that all the panelists brought forth that the context of performance seems to be a double-edged sword. So in one sense, I can use it to get away, and in one sense, someone can use it to catch me or trap me. So when does Dion, being a regular Dion, posting on social media in dancehall clothes, not for performance, or possibly smoking a spliff? It's decriminalized, guys. Alright, and I have to study. Alright? When does it stop being, okay, I'm doing this for context, let me post against a Bob Marley picture so that I can get away with it? When will it become, I don't have to worry about the international bar's position on what my ethics and my values are?
Good evening. My name is Ramona Bueller. I'm doing my fieldwork here about dancehall tourism and how it affects dancers' lives. And my question is, can dancehall tourism be a form of neo-colonialism? I've been interviewing dancehall dancers here in Jamaica, and there are quite divided opinions about it. Like some people think that, or some people are totally okay with foreigners participating in dancehall culture, but there are some problematic things that have come up. One of them is that foreigners make money with dancehall culture. There are a lot of people who come here, they go back to their countries and teach dancehall. It's problematic because we have access, we have these people, yeah, they have social mobility, they can travel to different countries, they can come here, they can learn from Jamaicans, but the Jamaican dancers who actually create the steps and who leave the culture, who leave the culture don't have the same possibilities. So the foreigners create competition and make it harder for Jamaican dancers to make a living with dancing. Another thing is spatial appropriation that happens here at dancehall parties. When we go to parties, a lot of tourists take space by going in the middle of a circle and dance, and I feel it's problematic because we get a lot of attention. The DJ would call out and say, "Oh, look at the white girl," and we would get the video, we would get the attention. And it's problematic because for Jamaican dancers, going to dancehall parties is promoting yourself, and they need that attention to get bookings, get money, and that's a work for them. Whereas for us, because we have other choices, we don't have to be dancers because we have access to education and other jobs. So for us, we are privileged enough to have dancehall just as a hobby, not as a lifestyle. And the second thing, or one more thing, is a lot of most tourists who come here are women, and a lot of them form relationships with Jamaican male dancers. And Donna mentioned it, I think. She talked about this in another lecture, but how we sexualize the black male body. And I think all these things that I mentioned, it has to do with unequal power dynamics that stem from colonialism and slavery. So my question is, are we am I and other people who come from Europe and other continents and countries, are we unwittingly exercising our privilege? Yeah, are we colonizing? Yeah, perpetuating colonialism. That's my question.
Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Mona, and I just want to interject interject before I respond to a couple of the comments that Mona, after I always try to pronounce her name, but it represents just one element of a huge chain of Europeans who are not only using dancehall in various ways and dancehall dance, but are also doing academic research on dancehall and writing theses, undergraduate theses, master's theses, PhD theses. While here in Jamaica, because again of the love that here we have with dancehall, our students on this campus and other campuses have been exiled from interrogating their own culture in that academic way. So on my dancehall archive website, we have a bibliography that really lists theses and books written about dancehall. There's a growing wave since 2010 coming forward of European, especially women, who I've worked with a lot of them here, who have written masters and PhD theses on dancehall. In the next 5 or so years, all the books on dancehall will be coming from Europe. So I'm just underwriting that for you to understand. I have the privilege because of the work I'm doing, and I'm going to Berlin in May again, working with a lot of these women and men to be a part of the work they are doing. And in a dancehall, because the UA Press resides on the desk of everybody that I've ever met. No, it's true, my first book. But it's something that we are not understanding very clearly. And so the question that she has posed comes out of a lot of reflection on the dancehall from her own involvement with it, being a participant, but also doing a lot of reading and research, which seems to have escaped a lot of our students on this campus. And I personally am very concerned about it. So the debate that we are having and the one that we are talking to, Mr. Bailey, I just want to reflect on your comment. And there's a point that you made which is important and which comes up in a lot of the work. I've done a lot of work, so it's just 40 minutes I can't talk about it, in terms of the way that dancehall was several things in the 80s and 90s. Coming out of that period, for example, that people like Carl Stone wrote about the patron-clientelist structures and the way that guns were introduced into communities, poor communities, by politicians. We still have suffering recovered from that. And the kind of way that garrisons of our communities become places where young men and the lives of young men were put at risk. And underscoring the point you made, which I didn't get to do, the Jamaica we live in today was not formed in the 60s and the nice post-independence era. The Jamaica we live in today, my students have to watch Life and Death and these documentaries, was formed in the harsh 1980s. Terrible time. Riots and burnings in Kingston and all kinds of carrying on. Hard times, post-structural adjustment blues. That is why dancehall began and sounded the way it did. It could sing nice, beautiful songs of Black power because the era was different. People were suffering. And the music coming out of Kingston, which is where the music comes from, had to reflect on these realities. I was a teenager, and it was a terrible time for poor people. Linstead poor people I come from, it was a terrible time. We suffered significantly in that period. ICIs, free zone, a whole heap of stuff was happening. People were blocking roads and lighting cars. They no longer do those things in Jamaica. It's a different society. People don't light cars in the middle of the street. They stopped doing that thing. Very rare, but it's a different society. So we have to reflect on where it comes from and the era in which it was birthed and why it sounds that way. And the majority of you students were not there to conceptualize. I'm going to use that word. I don't have my glasses, but I think that the young man, the question he raises is the one that we have been trying to flesh out about this clash of identities. And the fact that because of the democratization of access, and I wrote about it in that Observer article, Dancehall Lawyers and whatever, and the New Millennium that came out on the Monday after the debacle. There's been I'm going to use the democratization of access to law that comes at the University of the West Indies. When we started the university, 2% of the population of Jamaica had access to tertiary education, 2% of the population of this country. And that was a very, very carefully selected population. What happens, particularly 2010 and after, is that law, we now have a larger opening for students to come to this campus and do law. Before that, it was a very carefully reserved category where you had to go to Barbados to go to do the law degree, and then a few people went to Barbados, and so it was very carefully closed off. Now you have a faculty of law here, you have law at UTEC, you have the University of London law. A lot more people are doing law. democratization of access, where ordinary people, lots more, can do law. It means that people like yourself who have different sensibilities are now law students. How does that impact on how you identify yourself? And Natisha was one of my students at one. I've had a lot of students. I've been teaching for a very long time. I taught my first course as an undergraduate, at the level 3 undergraduate in the Department of Government. I've been teaching for a really long time, so I've had a whole heap of students. But it is a reflection, you know, on the way that the society is changing, and individuals like yourself, the new generation of millennials, what do they call them? Generation something, Gen Z, Gen something, Gen Z, are pushing against the barriers and insisting that there must be change. Because what you're suggesting, and Natisha also hinted at it, is that this elite category of law students, which as Nadeen said, once you get the letter, you know, you're elevated, you're now accepted. Yes, you are.
Yes.
That was always the perception.
Yes.
And the desires that many students articulate when you're at high school. I want to be a lawyer or a doctor. It's not only because you want to contribute to justice and medical, you want to go up in society and be higher placed, social elevation. That is one of the reasons why you say this, you know. There's an idea in our society and many other societies that being a lawyer or a medical doctor will elevate you not just socially, but also economically and all the other. You will be elevated. Your status step up. And your family will put all their resources behind it. But remember, that category also comes with a lot of weight. And there's a particular profile and there are expectations. Law students, ladies' foot must lock. Their dress must not be, so there are expectations. What is happening in this kind of conversation that we are being forced to have is a kind of pushing against these barriers, and you're asking very pertinent questions. Is it that I'm not legitimately able as a young man from Spanish Town? I went to St. James, Spanish Town used to be nice and different. But now Spanish Town broke out into 4. We work with it. A young man from Spanish Town that is raised to appreciate church, school, family, cartel, debtor crew, everything all at once in a mix. I'm a law student and I'm a productive citizen of Jamaica, I'm not a criminal. Can't I then also appreciate what is my culture and be integrally involved with it? This is a question that the society has to answer. We are in a stage of transition, and that's what I say to you. You are going to have to deal with, all of you, at this point of transition, the kind of responses that you're getting, and you are the ones who will have to do the pushback. I will write the books and write the and do the research, but remember, it is no, I'm serious, because what youth culture also does is to rebel against the society's formations and to insist on transformation. It is your battle. Shouldn't law students be able to go to dancehall too? Not just that professor who take them on a field trip, and then because you're on the field trip, you can say, well, I did a dancehall, and they have you on, like, we have a video up on Sexy Tuesday's website with Ivan McCullough dancing in the middle of dancehall. You know Ivan, right? Yes. Yes, and this is legitimate because we're on a field trip. Can't you just go there if you want to? And maybe go on the top of your head, ladies. I don't think it is going to be well reflected on by senior council, because we are still in a society where this is seen a particular way. But the question is a legitimate one in Jamaica in 2019. Who are you as a young person? Who are the people that you reflect on as a part of your heritage? What do you see as your culture? Is it Kumina? And are you going to be dressing in Kumina clothing and wearing drunken costumes? Or this is a very serious discussion we're having. What is your heritage culture? What is your contemporary culture, and how do you reflect? And this is a question we have to answer for the young people. Yes.
So as it relates to where, so this side of the table represents you growing up in your community, and this side of the table represents law school and lawyer. So from a conceptual point of view, and this is, it's important to note the role that law plays in society, the role that the judiciary plays in society, and how it's supposed to balance society. So the concept is that the judiciary and what follows are all the officers of the court and ministers of the court are supposed to represent the dignity the authority and the awesomeness of the state. So that's a concept that we have bought into when we speak about the Westminster Parliamentary Constitutional Model that we have adopted, where we have the three separate arms of government. So that is a fundamental concept. The question of how it manifests itself and what is, so the question is, so what is dignified? So what represents authority? And there we see the crossing over or the influence of colonization. And we go back to the pictures of the female attorneys with the wigs and what role you can play to push back or change those norms that were accepted and still are accepted today. So for the first time, well, the law students in the room had pushed back when Dr. Batts had put that picture and was questioning whether or not lawyers still wear wigs in court. Well, up until this year, when you're called to the inner bar as Queen's Counsel, you're required to wear that same white wig that you hear in court, looking exactly like that. However, my wife, Cameron, who was called to the inner bar this year, she's from this similar inner city, very similar to, very close to Dunkirk. She was the first Queen's Counsel who did not wear, who went against the practice, the sacred tradition and practice. She had to speak to the president of the Court of Appeal, the president of the bar, the president, run it by all the senior counsel, and find out whether or not she could do this and still be called to the inner circle. But she had made a decision that she was not going to wear that white wig because that is too foreign a concept. So that's one small step, but that is where we are coming from. Those are the terms we agreed to. That is a historical place from which we come. So I just wanted, we need to define what is dignified, what represents authority. And if we can address those fundamental issues, we can now start out about who we should dress up to look like to represent those things. I don't know if I've assisted to address the issue.
And I think the point, because Shackelford, Andre, he left, okay, because he had raised the similar question about how can individuals in a professional space engage with vulgar dancehall in course, and because he was reflecting in a similar way on, for example, the kind of space that lawyers inhabit, and law students are actually through that door. You're already there, beginning to inhabit it. How do you then engage with vulgar dancehall, using the terminology that is very popular, and still be appropriately represented as lawyers? Is it that you, and I keep asking the question, can you engage with it when you're off duty, when you're off stage? When you're off, for example, the public Instagram page of the Law Society, in your own Instagram page, is a question that people are asking. Is it that lawyers can be figured as dancehall in their personal space, but more in a private arena? For example, at this party that somebody sent me pictures while I'm here, of lawyers, two lawyers who are at this event dressed in dancehall dress up like, man and woman out of the garrison. So there are people who are play acting in that space, but that is a performance that is clearly underscored as such. They are not representing themselves as lawyers who are a part of dancehall, but maybe as lawyers performing dancehall in costume. And so there's that question that the professional space that has particular codes of dress, particular expectations, and as you say, Chuck, the idea of authority that is vested in the judiciary, which is an elevated location, and dancehall, which still continues to be at a different level. How then do these clashing locations and profiles engage? This is something that is it that it's an off-duty engagement or an off-stage engagement behind the scenes? Because this is what the students are asking. And as young people, these are decisions that they're trying to have examined, questions that are supposed to be examined, but in the real sense, the society has not accepted or underwritten that kind of merging in that sense.
So I am, as I said, so back about, say 10 years ago, they had something named as UPT. Nobody would know that here apart from. Okay. But that is uptown owning and owning and attempting to appropriate and successfully doing so dancehall culture. So I would never attempt to pass myself off as part of the dancehall culture or UPT. But what I have been successfully able to do is apply myself in the law, be able to express myself and express my thoughts in writing and vocally, and in the same breath, I have the liberty at any uptown party, at any legal bar association party, I can dress any way I want and dance with any lawyer or any female, senior counsel or young counsel. So when we had our law society, when we had our Christmas party at law school, because I understand and articulate what is expected of me, I could comfortably take a wine off at any of my tutors. Comfortably. I never know. No, it's not necessarily a question of me, because I stood out. The point I'm making is being confident and comfortable with self and defining and determining how you want to define self.
And also because you already have the degree and you are a student. Oh, and you're married, all right. I don't know why I tell you that, but you're married. That's it. I hope that didn't go into it. I heard that. Yeah, but I have, because I'm just responding to what was it? It was Dion, and she was also asking, because that is the question, she was also asking, in a sense, when the clashing identity becomes legitimate. And this, I think we're trying to work that out, but again, it's always a process. Erna, I always try to pronounce the name, she asked some questions, and a lot of them are related to some of the work and the research I'm doing, and I wondered if anybody would have wanted to comment on it in terms of whether they see the activities of, and I'm going to sort of say, white Europeans, especially white European women, borrowing, and I see Mr. Bailey's hand going up, coming into Jamaica, coming into dancehall, and then basically appropriating different aspects of the dancehall product for their own purposes, whether for education or for income generation, if you see it as a kind of colonialism, neo-colonialism. It can be, and I'm saying, I'm answering as well, it can be seen as that, but it also can be seen as many other things, because one of the things the research has shown, aside from the fetishization of the black male body and this neo-colonial move, is also that because of the way that dancehall and many of its adherents are locked here in Jamaica in poverty, it also provides real opportunities that would have been denied these men and women for visibility, for income generation, and for something that many Jamaicans see as a luxury. I have met individuals who still live in the garrison, in the gully, in the ghetto, in the trench, who have traveled to probably 30 European cities. Foreign travel to big foreign, which is Europe. In Jamaica, small island in the Caribbean. Foreign is the US of the Canada is Canada, but big foreign or overseas is Europe. And these young men and women have been traveling to 20 and 30 different European cities. They still live in the garrison. They are speaking, they have different pieces of them. Some of them speaking a little German, a little French, a little Spanish. So they are becoming exposed and open to a lot of other opportunities through this kind of cross-fertilization that has not yet been ratified. I mean, we're trying to get help with the Schengen visas, and they have not yet been ratified by the government. They are bringing a lot of women and men to Jamaica to fill up the Airbnbs in Kingston in particular. and we are still not getting the ratification. So again, there are opportunities that are being created through this transfer of culture. Even if Mr. Bailey come and say something, I see you want to say something, there is some amount of appropriation going on. So something has to be given up, and somehow a lot of that is happening in the process.
So I think that is where our university would have failed and society would have failed in the past as it relates to the issue you have raised. If it is our professionals, our accountants, our attorneys, societies accepted dancehall and dancehall culture, one, as a part of our culture, two, played their role in the development of dancehall culture, the whole issue of appropriation and colonialization wouldn't be, those would just be seen as distribution channels, because copyrights would be in place, we'd have had our accountants in place, we'd have had our own promoters in place. So it wouldn't be a matter of uptown promoters now putting on dances and eating food, but it would be part of an industry. And my view is that, and Dr. Hope can really school me on this, but my view is today, we do not have a transparent industry. We have created the greatest music, we have created the greatest dances, but we do not have an industry. If it was an industry, we would only view your participation in it as an opportunity as opposed to a threat. So this is where I think these sort of conversations are important. This is where I think society has failed, and us, you law students have a role to play, and other university students have a role to play, not to protect and lock it down, but how do we go back to maximize what we have and utilize these opportunities.
Yes. I'm sure somebody has an appropriate forum later. But I want to hand over to a law student, Joanne Hilton, to say a word of thanks. You can tell we could have stayed here with your professor who had this camera for a long time. But we're appreciative of the time, and you can see how valuable the conversation is, and that it should be the first of many like it. Many like it.
That's it? Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I must say that this has been an exceptional discussion. I'm happy I came instead of dreading over my worksheets. Some interesting questions were raised by our panelists and our audience. We had Professor Hope, who had set the context of this discussion. We understood where dancehall was coming from, where it is right now, and where it might go. We also heard from Mr. Cameron, who gave us the relationship between law, culture, and dancehall, how it relates with information in society. And we also had some strong competing views from Ms. Spence, but she also helped us to understand the role of feminism, how we are supposed to understand the anti-thought spaces we live in today. And so certain questions come up in our discussion, certain questions that we could use to speak with our parents, to speak with our peers, to speak with those in high positions. I know I've had some intense creative discussions with my parents, with my church family, with a lot of, even my peers who have competing thoughts as well. One, why should my professional being be belittled because I practice my culture? Is my freedom of expression being limited by joining the legal fraternity? And we as law students know that rights can be limited by the government, demonstrably justifiable, democratic society. But we're not talking about the government's role in this regard. We're talking about what the legal fraternity or other sectors might do to limit our freedom. Am I now in a box? Am I now in a box to prevent myself from being who I am? We also consider, where does the play acting stop? And with all these questions and many more that I can't really touch on right now, we understand the role that we play now as students, as young people, the role that we have to play to change certain thoughts, certain thought processes. So we understand that we are in a society that is in a state of transition that was put forward. And it is a mantle that we now have to take up to go forward. And it's something that I know I will definitely do. And I just want to say thanks again to everyone who came. Thanks for who organized it. Thanks for the panelists. And please do have a good night.